The bell above the door of the old bookstore jingled, a hollow, tinny sound. The air was thick with the smell of yellowed paper, crumbling leather, and dust motes dancing in the slants of afternoon light. I was browsing the forgotten children's section, a dim corner where the shelves were a little too close together. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just killing time, my fingers trailing over the worn spines of fairy tales and adventures. That's when it happened. A book, a slim volume with a plain, dark cover, simply slipped from the middle of a tightly packed shelf. It didn't tumble. It fell with a deliberate, flat finality, landing with a soft thump right at my feet, splayed open as if by an unseen hand. A shiver, completely irrational, went down my spine. I crouched down more from reflex than curiosity. It was a children's picture book. The title, stamped in faded gold foil, was obscured by a shadow. The text was simple, rhythmic, almost mundane. It told the story of a peculiar monster, not one that lived under beds or in closets, but one that hid in words. It lurked in the spaces between letters, in the hiss of an S, the growl of a G, the silent void of a period. But the illustrations were not mundane. They were detailed, lush, and deeply unsettling. On the first page, the monster was a formless, ink-blot shadow, coiled within the text of a sentence. As I turned the pages, the story described the monster becoming curious about the world outside the page. And in the pictures, it began to change. It grew limbs. It developed a posture. The vague shape of a head gained definition. My breath hitched. The monster's casual slouch in one picture was eerily familiar. The way it held a book in another, the tilt of the head, the curve of the fingers, was a mirror of my own habits. A cold dread, heavy and slow, began to pool in my stomach. I kept turning, my heart hammering against my ribs now, a prisoner trying to escape. Page by page, the transformation became horrifyingly specific. The monster's hairline matched mine. The style of its glasses, which had appeared from nowhere, was identical to my own. The faint scar above its eyebrow, the one I got as a child, was now etched into the monster's illustrated face. It was no longer a monster in a story. It was me, a grotesque, simplified, yet unmistakable version of myself, peering out from the watercolor and ink. Terror had frozen me in place, a statue in the dusty aisle. My hand, trembling violently, felt compelled to turn to the final page. The text ended with a simple, chilling line, and the monster finally found a way out. The illustration was a masterpiece of horror. The monster, my monster, was no longer hiding in words. It sat in the middle of a cozy, familiar-looking room, and it was holding a book. This book. It was looking down at the open pages in its hands with a faint, knowing smile. But that wasn't the worst part. In the background of the picture, the child from the story, who had been the reader within the tale, was no longer looking at the monster. The child had turned. It was pointing a small, accusing finger directly out of the page. Past the monster, past the boundaries of the illustration, past the very spine of the book. The child was pointing straight at me. The world of the bookstore, the smells, the sounds, the light, all collapsed into a silent, screaming tunnel focused on that page. My vision blurred, then sharpened with painful clarity on the book's cover, which I had finally dislodged from the shadow in my panic. There, in that same faded gold foil, was not a fictional title. It was a name, my full name. It had been my story all along. The monster hiding in the words had been waiting, and it had finally found its reader, its reflection, its way out. The last thing I heard before the silence swallowed me whole was the distant, mocking jingle of the bell on the door, as if someone or something had just left, or perhaps just entered.